Welcome to the Deep Dive Book Club podcast. I'm Leo.
I'm Joel.
You can reach us at the Deep Dive Book Club at gmail.com. I'll get it right one of these days.
It's okay. Our Instagram is also Deep Dive Book Club, which you can message us at.
For anyone just tuning in, this podcast is centered on having long format discussions about books we have read or books we are in the process of reading. We dive into both fiction and nonfiction books. The only thing better than reading a good book is having a great discussion about it, and we want to include you in the conversation.
So whether you've read the book, haven't read the book, or are listening to this a couple years in the future, you can still message us and share your feelings and opinions on what we read. Today we are going to do episode 2 of 2 for Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. So you can go back to the last episode and listen to that if you want to, where we go over a little synopsis and go through the first half of the book. And today we'll be finishing up that book, finish off talking about the characters, go through the other characters, talk about Ohm, and some more of the philosophy interlaced within the fictional work by Terry Pratchett that have real-life consequences.
All right, let's start off by talking about the philosophers of Ephebe, and particularly Didactylos.
Sure. And Ephebe is more or less Terry Pratchett's, not personification, but
his version of like Greece,
yeah,
Athens, that type of thing.
His version of the Greek city-states, full of philosophers.
And togas.
Or bullshit artists.
Right. When Brother and Ohm visit Ephebe, they encounter philosophers engaged in what those philosophers would call serious philosophical discourse. But to Brother, it looked like a bar fight. The main philosopher Brother encounters and journeys with briefly, Didactylos, has a particularly memorable philosophy.
Quote, his philosophy was a mixture of 3 famous schools, the Cynics, the Stoics, and the Epicureans, and summed up all 3 of them in his favorite phrase, you can't trust any bugger further than you can throw him, and there's nothing you can do about it, so let's have a drink, end quote.
That sounds like Pratchett's interpretation of bullshit artist philosophers.
With a nice British spin on it, yeah.
True. I appreciate the word bugger in there. So what do you think about Didactylos' philosophy?
I liked the nice humorous summary that Pratchett gave for basically the 3 schools of thought.
The Epicureans, the Cynics, and the Stoics?
Yeah.
Do you think Pratchett is saying here sometimes these guys take themselves a little too seriously?
I think that's part of it, but in this case, in his portrayal of them, they're specifically not taking themselves seriously, such as Didactylos.
Would you live out Didactylos' philosophy?
I'm not really a cynic. I can see the other 2 that's useful.
You can't trust any bugger further than you can throw him, and there's nothing you can do about it, so let's have a drink. So the let's have a drink part, let's have a good time, let's celebrate, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, I have to be careful with thinking about that idea of, well, there's nothing I can do about it, because it can easily lead me to get the scope wrong, because there are things that you can do stuff about, and I guess that leans more into the Stoics' way of thinking, like, I can control how I respond to something, how I feel about something, and I can exert a little bit of control there at the same time, letting go and letting stuff happen the way it's supposed to happen. You look like you want to say something.
But can you do anything about it? Or is everything just predetermined based on your genetics and upbringing?
You know, I don't know, but I'm going to act as if I do have free will, and I'm going to act as if I can control something.
But you can't control being on a flying rock through space.
Right, and that's something I'm just not going to waste time lamenting about.
Can't do anything about it.
And I don't drink, so I can't. I mean, I'll drink a non-alcoholic beer.
I think the Epicurean ideology that's summed up here is enjoying life regardless of what's happening. I think it's a nicer version of the absurdism ideology that developed like with Camus.
I do appreciate Didactylos' implied moral imperative here that you should enjoy life.
No other way to live.
And I like the contrast here between the Omnian Church's tenets and outlook compared with Didactylos' and Ephebe more generally. They're very contrasting.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the Omnian Church is more of a stand-in for orthodox style religious institution.
More structured, follow the rules, kind of an interpretation of a puritanical way of looking at things. Definitely not leaning towards the side of enjoy life.
Right.
So is Didactylos wise, or is he just a philosophical sounding crank?
I don't think he has to be either one. I don't think it's a dichotomy here. I also don't think that he's a crank. I'm not sure that I would say that he's necessarily wise, although he's not a crank.
Okay. Any other feelings about Didactylos?
I mean, he was a nice, fun character. I think his ending was really good. I think him being the blind philosopher was entertaining. The tropes that they encountered throughout the journey, I think, were amusing.
I appreciated his role in the story. Remind me, because it's been a little while, how does his arc end? Isn't he on a boat?
After Vorbis basically tricks the Ephebian Council and is going to put them to the sword, and all these people are supposed to renounce their ungodly ways and come to the Omian Church. He basically tricks Vorbis into thinking that he is going to convert, and then plays one last philosophical prank on him, and then runs away and helps the rest of the characters escape Vorbis's wrath.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, the situation is set up so that Didactylos could capitulate and act out bending the knee towards what Vorbis wants and his worldview. And Didactylos neither bends the knee or defies him. He does both. He says, oh yeah, absolutely. If that's what you want, you're right. Might makes right. And then he's out of there. He just leaves.
Right. Which for me is what my philosophy would be. And we see these over-dramatized events through movies where the protagonist is in like a scary situation, like they're talking to, some ex-boyfriend or whatever, and he is crazy, and all they have to do is lie and say, yeah, we can get back together, that's fine. And then 5 minutes later, they could just walk out the door and never see this person again. But instead, they have to like stay truthful and honorable and moral by only telling the truth and saying, no, we can't do that, and putting themselves in further danger, which to me is always a ridiculous notion. I guess I don't have any moral quandaries with lying to find a safe space.
To save yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a lot of good drama is based off of choosing to tell the truth when it's inconvenient.
Yeah, but sometimes it's absurdly inconvenient.
I'm looking up that particular scene right now. Here's some imagery I enjoy while I'm looking this up. This is Pratchett describing Didactylos' mind. Of his mind, he was saying, it bubbled and flashed like a pot full of electric eels on full boil. I really like that image. Okay, here's the confrontation. Vorbis is upset. This is when they take control of the city. Vorbis is upset about a book that Didactylos published about the world being flat, and Vorbis's worldview and the Omnian religion's worldview purports it to be spherical. The irony here, of course, that we mentioned last episode is that Discworld is actually flat and on the back of a turtle. And so Vorbis is confronting him, and he's saying, oh, this book is a lure to trap minds and ensnare people. And then Vorbis, the scene's set up so that Didactylos can back up what he wrote, and Vorbis is like, do you deny this? And Didactylos just says, yeah, nope, it can be a sphere if you want. It can be whatever you want. You're the one in charge. Let it be a sphere, Didactylos said. No problem with a sphere. No doubt special arrangements are made for everything to stay on, and the sun can be another larger sphere a long way off. Would you like the moon to orbit the world or the sun? I advise the world. More hierarchical and a splendid example to us all. And Vorbis is upset, and he's saying, but you said the world is on the back of a giant turtle. You gave the turtle a name. Didactylos shrugged. Now I know better. Whoever heard of a turtle 10,000 miles long, swimming through the emptiness of space? Ha! For stupidity. I'm embarrassed to think of it now. So there's a perfect example of what you're describing. Just lie to save your life. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I think later on he uses that lying to then rescue all the other characters, and then recants all of that as he's fleeing safely.
You might be right. You want to look it up?
No, we've already been sitting here long enough.
The listener doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts you have about Didactylos, his philosophy.
No. Do you have any other thoughts about Didactylus?
No, I just glancing back through there, I do appreciate his character.
Yeah.
All right, next topic. What you got?
I think you just wrote down some one-liner. We're philosophers, we think, therefore we am. Slave is an Ephebian word. In Ohm we have no word for slave, said Phorbas. So I understand, said the tyrant. I imagine that fish have no word for water. Silence unrolled its restless length.
I really like that line. Silence unrolled its restless length. I appreciate Pratchett's one-liners for sure.
Yeah, some of his books, it's just one-liner after one-liner. It's so good.
And I think you mentioned this last episode, but this isn't even his best work,
this isn't
right?
even his final form.
Got it. But there's not another good book that could be read as a one-off by itself, right?
I think the other good books that you could read as one-offs are Pyramids. I think that was a good one that had some nice humor in it. And I think if you read the initial books of some of the different series, it also stands, as a one-off because he didn't have it like in a serial format and then published it bit by bit. Like The Lord of the Rings, for example, if you read the first one, it's really just part of that trilogy. But in his books, I think you could just read it and be done with it. So I think the other two starts that are pretty easy is like Guards, which I think is one of the ones that made him pretty famous, and Mort, which is I think the first book in his Death series.
And you were mentioning the way he writes death. Death always speaks in capital letters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How does that, when you're picturing Death talking in your head, how does his all caps talking come out?
Well, Death doesn't have any quotation marks. It's just capital letters. And so it's used to intertwine the humor of when someone's speaking or when Death shows up, and then goes away just as quickly. So I guess in my head, there's no quotation marks because he's not saying anything. It's more of an ethereal set of words appearing in your head.
That is interesting to see how different authors handle speaking or communication that's not handled out loud, but still between characters or happening to characters. I've seen, and I can't remember the book, but I've seen telepathic communication not happen with quotations, but happen with italics. The all caps is interesting choice there.
I don't even know the right word for it, but how you write something down and the way that it conveys its meaning to you outside of words is very entertaining to me. And the utilization of books as a medium. I think the one I can think of as the most iconic is House of Leaves.
Yeah.
Which has so many different, strange ways of using a book as a medium. It's utterly impressive.
Very interesting exercise. And yeah, the right word to describe exactly what's happening there eludes me. Neither of us are literature majors, even though we love literature. I don't know the word there, but I remember that book specifically. That's a book where I would say it's not possible to get the experience that was intended without the physical book. You can't read it electronically. You'd have to read the physical book because you have to oftentimes turn the book a certain way or use the pages a certain way to see what's happening there.
Use a mirror. I think there was a portion where I had to use a mirror to read the thing.
Oh, I don't remember that. He was doing all kinds of stuff.
Fonts would change, and the changing of the fonts indicated, things happening inside the story world. Mm-hmm. And so all of these unique utilizations of a book as a medium was impressive.
Right. Interactive. You were interacting not with the story coming off of the page, but you're interacting with the pages and the book itself. Interesting idea.
The story, yeah. And I guess that's just another way that I think Pratchett utilizes the book as a medium of using capital letters. He also doesn't have any chapters. It's all just a flow.
Oh, that's right.
Which, again, is, I think, another characteristic that he uses in his style of writing.
That's right. I forgot about that. That's all his books?
As far as I remember, yeah, I can't think of any that had subsections.
How do you feel about that? I remember we were talking to someone about this, and
they got livid.
They were very upset that there were no chapters and breaks.
Yeah, extraordinarily upset that there's no breaks whatsoever.
How do you feel about that? I mean, I know you like his works in a series. How do you feel about his lack of breaking stuff up into sections.
It's fine by me. I don't need sections.
Yeah, that's interesting. I forgot all about that. It took a second for me to get used to it, but it didn't bother me. It did. I do remember it really bothering some people.
Yeah, extraordinarily angry.
Yeah, interesting. I get it. You're used to chapters. You're used to things being broken up into their separate spaces.
Organization.
Stuff being organized. This is its own form of organization. I don't even remember if he uses asterisks to break up like scenes or hard breaks.
But isn't that what life is? We just draw arbitrary organizations of, oh, this is a chapter in my life, or this is, my college years or whatever. But really, life in itself doesn't care about your arbitrary organizations or subheadings for your own existence. Life continues on in a flowing, ever-continuous state.
I think it's people trying to grasp things in a way that helps them understand them, keep them categorized, and move things around in the arbitrary buckets we put things in. Helps us out there. I get it. I get people wanting sections and headings and chapters and subtitles.
That's fine. I'm just saying the reality of life is that it is just a continuity. There are no subsections.
True. I like Pratchett's style there. If I were to write something, it's going to have chapters and subtitles and sections and breaks. It's a fun style, though. Probably not something my mind could pull off in a nice fluid way. Okay, let's talk about a miracle. When crossing the desert, Ohm at one point digs deep underground to bring Brother water. Delirious and half dead, Brother responds to Ohm's mundane explanation of how he got the water. Quote, "Sounds like a miracle to me," croaked Brother. "Just because you can explain it doesn't mean it's not still a miracle." End quote. What do you think, Joel? If you can explain a miracle, is it still a miracle?
I think it's still a miracle. I think it's miraculous that we have evaporation developing into precipitation and then the utilization of sunlight with that precipitation on a specific plant. In this case, grapes can develop that eventually into wine, and that happens every day. These beautiful miracles of life. And just because we can explain it or understand it better, that doesn't make it any less miraculous.
What do you think about the fact that Ohm's like, I just dug this out of the ground. It's there. It's not miraculous. What do you think about Brother's perception of it and that he insists on calling it a miracle?
Well, Brother, again, is the only true believer of Ohm. And for him, it is a miracle. It is miraculous. He has a beautiful way of looking at life, I guess. In my head, this scene was showing that Brother has a more authentic view of life than the other followers of the Ohmian church.
I really appreciated the kind of glimpse we get of Brother's personality and character here. Just, he's half dead, he's delirious, but he still insists on seeing the world in this particular way.
And in this case, he's even almost more divinely inspired than the God himself that is bringing the water.
For sure. We see that often throughout the book, where this mere human who's full of limitations seems more not divine, but more spiritual than the God himself.
Right.
I like that. So do you think this is Brother's faith in Ohm on display, or is it a faith in something else, maybe something larger, more abstract?
I think it's by definition his faith in Ohm, because he's a believer in Ohm.
See, what I got from it was more so his faith in a larger concept, because Ohm is getting smaller and smaller on his horizon just because of his continued interactions with this little tortoise that's not quite meeting up to the image he has in Ohm. And it's his idea of how the world works and how life functions that he's speaking to at that point. For me. For you, I completely get how you see that's him with his faith in Ohm.
Sure, yeah.
Looks like you have a quote here you want to go over.
Pulling from Pratchett's other works, and I think reflect how he was thinking when he wrote this scene. Bring that in together here. All right. So, Pratchett, quote, "I get the horrible feeling that we live in a big, ever-repeating circle where we do things because it is predicted that we will do things, all effect and no cause," end quote.
All effect and no cause. He's saying that he's expressing maybe like existential dread here, that there's stuff that we're just in motion. There's not a cause behind us. We're kind of untethered.
Yep. All effect, no cause.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, he could be right. We keep doing the same things because we did them before. Things are predicted to happen, so they keep going.
All effect, no cause. Humans are all effect, no cause. I have to think about that. It's interesting.
Another one from Pratchett, quote, "When someone is saved from certain death by a strange concatenation of circumstances, they say that's a miracle. But of course, if someone is killed by a freak chain of events, the oil spilled just there, the safety fence broke just there, that must also be a miracle. Just because it's not nice doesn't mean it's not miraculous," end quote.
I think the word you were looking for there is concatenation, I believe. I believe that's how you say that.
That makes sense.
When someone is saved from certain death by a strange concatenation of circumstances, they say it's a miracle. I really like his turn of phrase there. Concatenation of circumstances. Beautiful alliteration, beautiful flow. He's got a natural talent for that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think what he's saying here is that stuff happens and we look back on it and we make up a story, even though it's just random stuff happening in a series.
Sure. Yeah. Just because it's not nice doesn't mean it's not miraculous.
Interesting. These are from other novels?
No, I just pulled them from quotes. They could have been written in a book, but they're just Pratchett quotes.
Okay, these are just Pratchett quotes.
Yeah.
Unsure.
Untethered, if you will.
Untethered. All effect, no cause. No chapters, no headings. The no chapters, no headings is kind of him enacting what he's expressing there explicitly of all effect, no cause. Stuff just happens.
Stuff just happens.
Does that strike you as a little cynical or nihilistic?
No, I don't think so. I don't feel cynicism from this. I think it seems almost more awe-inspiring, perhaps more miraculous, like a person being more fulfilled in life by enjoying the simplicities and the miracles that are inside of the everyday simplicity.
So his idea of a miracle here, he gives the example of someone dying by a freak accident, is a very improbable event going from probability to actuality. Am I understanding that right?
Sure, yeah, I guess so.
How do you understand what he's saying there?
I think a series of circumstances that brings about some effect, regardless of whether it's good or bad, is miraculous.
So you're reading this thinking as the fact that anything is happening is miraculous. I'm seeing it more. I'm trying to understand what he means by miracle here, because here he's giving a bad outcome
As also being miraculous.
As the label of also being miraculous. So that's why I'm thinking he's just talking about something that reaches a threshold of improbability, but still turning into reality. And that's what we call a freak accident.
Yeah, a plane crash, right? A boat hitting a unbeknownst reef is, in a way, a miracle. But I think other people also argue very similar things to try to put a positive spin on negative things. For example, we sometimes see the, philosophical thought experiment of, well, if a bus crashes and it kills 20 people, but one of the people on that bus was going to grow up to be the next Hitler, right? Is that a miracle, or is that a tragic freak accident?
Right. How to think about situations like that. Same thing. Often when I'm listening to history podcasts or books and it's talking about war and the tragedies of war and the number of people that are killed, the thought that happens to me fairly often, especially when listening to Dan Carlin, because he does such a great job of humanizing these terrible times in history, is any one of those people could have been an Einstein, a genius, someone who could have invented a miracle cure, someone who could have invented better space travel, and they're just gone. It's just snuffed out. And it's hard to square sometimes. And at that level of, I get that feeling, and it feels a little bit more nihilistic when I think about it in a certain light, that it's all effect and no cause. Like, why do we do these things? Why do these things happen? Same thing when personal tragedies happen. Why is this happening? Then you have to pick up the pieces and make a story out of it. And I think on the opposite side of the nihilistic, cynical side, when I'm lucky enough to see things in a positive, optimistic light, you see moments as gifts. You see random happenings as gifts, and that helps a lot. Interesting. Good quotes. I like these. And again, on display here is masterful use of phrasing. Concatenation of circumstance. I really like that. I want to use that at some point. I don't know how. I want to somehow use that. Okay, any other thoughts you have here on miracles and his thinking about miracles?
No, not really. Do you?
No. I think that's a good pause point there on that one. Before we jump into the next one, let's take a quick break and get back in it.
All right, we're back. Brother's getting close to death and all of this. He's dying of dehydration and all these things. Upon realizing that brother's going to potentially fail and die, Ohm contemplates the nature of his own existence. Quote, "That's what happens," Ohm thought. "Being a small god was bad, except at the time you hardly knew that it was bad because you were only barely knew anything at all. But all the time there was something which was just possibly the germ of hope, the knowledge and belief that one day you might be more than what you were now. But how much worse to have been a god and to now be no more than a smoky bundle of memories, blown back and forth across the sand made from the crumbling stones of your temple." End quote. Ohm, trying to explain the horrors of his existence as he sees it, tells brother about how life is like a sparrow flying through the window of a house. There's nothing but darkness outside, and as the sparrow flies through one window and out the other, it will only have been the one brief moment of light and warmth. What a interesting way to look at life itself. Such a brief moment.
I really like the imagery there. Two things that this brings to mind for us to talk about here is there's an important little insight into the way the spiritual world works in this novel, and most likely in the rest of Discworld, in that small gods, and we mentioned this briefly last episode, but the world is full of countless small gods, and it's faith that lets them grow and turn into larger gods. And that's how they all start. They start as like the hints of ideas and the hints of memories that get animated by faith and by humans believing in them and identifying them. And what the horror that Ohm is experiencing here is, here's my only believer, brother, who is on the verge of dying here in the desert. And if he dies, then that's it. That's my last chance. I go from having one believer to no believers, and I'm back to barely existing at all. And it's worse for him, he thinks, because at one point in time, he had thousands and thousands of believers that were fueling him and made him more real and more in the world and able to interact with the world. And he feels it's worse now to have been at that peak of existence and now looking like it's very likely that he's going to slide back into an almost kind of non-existence.
I think this is a similar philosophical thought related to the more recent Barbie movie, where, summarizing that movie as a whole, you have this doll-like character.
Right. I haven't seen it, so yeah, explain it to me.
You don't need to see it, although I know plenty of people thought it was a pretty good movie with reflections of life and the meaning of life. But long story short, this doll, Barbie, has to travel from the fake Barbie world to the real world and interact and try to get basically a believer or a child to play with her and believe in it so that she can continue to have her nice existence. And then towards the end of the movie, the character Barbie has to decide whether she wants to become a real woman or stay a fake Barbie. And
interesting.
Part of that question, which is reflected through plenty of books and movies, is it better to have lived and died in that short, brief period of time, or is it better to have not lived at all so that you didn't know what you were missing? And in the case here, Ohm is reflecting, if you were constantly a small god, or basically dead in a way, never born, you don't know what it was like, you don't know what you had, as opposed to rising and then falling, and in this case, being alive and then dying, being here for that brief moment, and then choosing to have been something at all.
So what do you think? Do you agree with Ohm's sentiment here that it's worse to have risen and fallen than to never achieve a higher sentience at all?
Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all?
Same sentiment, yeah. What do you think?
I feel like I have to choose the idea that it's better to have risen and fallen because, in a way, that is what being alive is, right? We are that sparrow flying through this briefest of moments. And we could look at it in a negative light saying, I'm so sad that I'm going to die. I'm so sad I'm going to lose my life. Or you could turn around and look at the same thing and say, well, I'm so happy that I got to live for the briefest of moments. I'm so happy that I got to be born in a most improbable way.
Goes back to that discussion on miracles and what makes a miracle and how you are looking at it. One thing I like about this scene and this line of thinking that Ohm has contrasted with Brother is that Brother never seems to lose his optimism and good nature in the face of existential threats, whereas Ohm is very much bemoaning the fact that he's risen and fallen. And he is leaning more, at least in this part of the book, towards, it's better to have never existed at all at a higher level if I'm just going to slide back into a version of non-existence. It's interesting. It's also interesting that you say that you feel like you have to believe in it's better to have risen and fallen than to have never risen at all, because that's our existence. And that makes me realize that we don't have the ability to compare that to anything. We have no other experience to compare that to. Interesting.
I suppose I say it with a more humorous cynicism of, I have to believe in this because this is the reflection of life. But I get to choose to believe in this, and that I'm happy that I get to live and die rather than to have never lived at all. Because that's, for me, a more happy way to go through life.
But you use the word have to, and that makes me think that you see it or feel it as a moral imperative, the same that seems to hold true for Brother himself.
I suppose so, yeah. But I guess I meant it more as a joke, but when you put it that way, it does feel like a moral imperative in my mind, although maybe it's not necessarily a moral imperative. Plenty of people are pessimistic and lament living rather than saying, I'm happy that I was alive at all.
For sure. Then people do think like that.
I suppose part of my personal belief is that enjoyment, laughter, and humor are all godly things, are all divine connections.
So what do you think of the idea here that we see on display, the type of almost nihilism that Ohm has, and its clash with Brother's unwaverable faith in a greater justice or a greater pattern?
I mean, who's carrying who here? Is Ohm the god taking care of his disciple Brother, or is Brother the disciple actually taking care of and bolstering his god Ohm?
It is a kind of inverted role there. It's also similar to how, if you're lucky enough to watch your parents grow old, how the dynamic and relationship begins to invert, and soon it's the child taking care of the parent rather than at the beginning of your life, the parent taking care of the child.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely that clash there, but I think it's a beautiful clash to see, I guess, who's supporting who. And like you were pointing out, you could see that in a parent-child relationship as well.
Right. And there's a kind of wrongness to the inversion here that we sense with Brother having to be the bigger person, so to speak, and kind of in more than one way carrying Ohm. To me, as the reader, that strikes me as like it's just not right. It's unfair. The God is supposed to be there for the benefit of the believer, not the other way around.
Yeah. What a nice inversion that Pratchett has given us.
And I think another question that naturally arises from this intersection is, okay, is Ohm deluded or missing something here, or is Brother deluded and being naive? In a way, Brother is not looking at things in what Ohm would say is like realistic. On the other hand, you could easily argue that Ohm is missing out on, Brother's viewpoint of hope and belief in a greater good, or missing part of the picture.
Right.
They're obviously missing parts of each other's pictures.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they very much clash and disagree. One of them, and we see this continue through the last little bit of the book, where Ohm wants one thing and Brother wants another thing, and it ends up being a clash. But the clashing in itself ultimately heads up to Brother being appointed the head of the Ohmian Church, and Brother reforming the church for the benefit of everyone and becoming more humanitarian. And I think Pratchett ends on a very happy note in the book. So I think the clash is good. I suppose they're deluded, but I would even question and wonder if Pratchett himself believes in order to make it through this life you need to be deluded, which is philosophy that we find in different works. And I can't point out a specific one. Maybe you can point out a specific one, but I think plenty of people think in order to make it through life, you have to be deluded.
I think that's something that you see in Dostoevsky novels, where the clash between being hopeful and being cynical, or being nihilistic and having a positive outlook, and deep interactions between those two sides in ourselves. And I think that's on display here in the two characters. And on the one hand, you could be hard-nosed and realistic and have that kind of sparrow flitting through a brief moment of light and look at it from a negative point of view, or you can go back and have that miraculous point of view. And this is a dialogue. For me, of course, I don't know what was going through Pratchett's mind and the ideas he grappled with. But for me, I see possibly this is an ongoing dialogue he had in himself. On the one hand, hope and kind of deluding yourself on the more hopeful, optimistic side, and on the other hand, leaning more into the cynical, nothing matters side.
In our in-person book club, maybe a couple weeks ago, we talked about in order to be an entrepreneur, in order to have successful businesses, in some cases, you have to be deluded. Like, you have to believe that you will succeed even with the low probability chance.
Optimistic martyr, I believe, was the term. And then I think another thought I had here on this was, would it be beneficial to take Brother's viewpoint? Would it be beneficial to live your life with more of Ohm's viewpoint? Or should we take a blend of the viewpoints? For me, my thinking is a cup full of the way Brother looks at life with a few drops of Ohm's bitterness.
Sometimes I think if you're too overly optimistic, then you won't see enough of the negative sides of things in order to be more realistic, and you end up having overly ambitious goals, or you end up having an overly positive viewpoint, and in some cases too charitable of a viewpoint of situations, people, businesses, relationships, interactions, and you don't change those enough, right? So if you're happy all the time, then why would you ever change a bad event or bad relationship? Because you're like, oh, I'm just looking at the positive all the time. And that can get you into trouble in plenty of cases.
Someone might respond to that who aggressively leans into being happy or optimistic, might say something to the effect of, well, if I'm feeling happy, then what does it matter? Your interpretation of the negative aspect of the situation. If someone is staying in a relationship that from the outside, you're like, that's an unhappy situation, or that's not an ideal situation. Why does that person convince themselves that they're in a good spot or that's fine? That is a potential response that you run into in situations like that.
Sure, but I guess some of these things are non-sustainable in the same way. Taking the extreme case of, say, drug use, that person is happy at the time that they're taking the drugs, but they're negatively impacting their future and the people around them, right?
You're arguing for, in that situation, someone who is kind of deluding themselves into the reality of their situation to, hey, let's look at things a little bit more objectively. And that sounds like you fall in line with having mostly a Brother outlook, but make sure you get some of the proper cynicism in there.
I think life is...
Yeah, I'm just asking about you.
Life is more enjoyable, in my mind, if you have Brother's outlook of every day is a miracle. Everything we're given is wonderful, and even if we can explain it, it's a miracle. We can make it through the desert, and we're going to do the right thing and have an optimistic outlook. Life is just sweeter that way. But we can't be so far that way that we don't have Ohm screaming in the back of our heads.
And ultimately, that constant interaction and friction between the two characters is what allows for Brother to grow and rise to the role that he does rise to.
Right.
It's kind of acted out in the novel of how that works in conjunction.
Yeah, because I think ultimately Brother takes the majority of the actions towards the end until everyone is following Brother as the disciple of Om, and then Om regains his powers because of Brother's actions, and then Om therefore capitulates to what Brother wants when Brother requests certain reform.
That's a good point, because throughout the novel you see Brother transition from almost purely passive to more and more active and making decisions on his own and having autonomy. He goes from almost no autonomy and completely passive to what's going on around him to being the center of his religious and spiritual world.
Lots of character development.
So next topic that I wanted to kind of discuss here is towards the end of the book. Om is desperately trying to catch up to Brother after they're separated. They're physically separated at one point. As Om gets closer, he begins to sense that Brother is about to start acting like a prophet. And this is distressing to Om. Quote, Brother's mind was flaming like a beacon in Om's senses. There's a streak of madness in everyone who spends quality time with gods, and it was driving the boy now. It's too soon, Om yelled. You need followers. It can't be just you. You can't do it by yourself. You have to get disciples first. End quote. And this is Om, freaking out and railing against the fact that Brother's kind of taking on this spiritual transformation where Om thinks he's not ready and Om thinks the situation is not right for it. What this made me think of is the difference between a prophet and a crazy person. You see someone on the street corner rambling and saying that they are God made manifest, and here in our society, that's not something that we see as valid, and we see it as, okay, that person's a little crazy. Whereas in maybe like Indian culture, they have a much more holistic and in-tuned concept of, divinity within yourself and you identifying with that divinity.
Can you
I'm thinking specifically of some of Alan Watts's lectures on spirituality and identifying with divinity. And there's a narcissistic, kind of short-sighted version of seeing yourself as godlike or speaking for the divine. And there's a more wholesome version of seeing the divine within yourself. And I see, to bring it back to what I'm seeing here in the book, the connection in the book, sorry for the meandering, is if someone just shows up, if Brother just shows up and says, I'm speaking for Om, I'm the prophet, and no one's going along with him, no one agrees with him, then he's just seen as both a crazy person and a heretic, even if he's speaking the truth. Because often we see perception and truth don't match up a lot of times, just like with people viewing the world as spherical versus flat in Discworld.
Yeah. Have you seen Begonia?
Say again?
Have you seen Begonia?
I don't know that I know what you're saying. Begonia.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a movie? Is it a book?
It's a movie. I mean, it's fine if you haven't.
No,
seen
I haven't.
It. And I guess we don't need to talk about it. But
I mean, you can't just tell me the name of a movie and then not tell me about the movie.
The movie is, if I were to compress it, there's this crazy alien follower person that believes in Andromedans and that the aliens are coming to control the human population. And he has his cousin who's a little slow-witted, but he has his cousin following in all of these conspiracy theories. He goes through all these things. He talks about how to identify aliens, and then they capture a rich CEO and say, you're an Andromedan alien, take us to your ship so that we can negotiate.
Oh, I saw the trailer for this. It looked interesting. You said you didn't like it that much?
I mean, yeah, but I mean, you might like it. It's possible.
Okay, well, keep going.
Anyways, so he's portrayed as this crazy person, and I think that's just an easy thing to latch onto for people that might see this. How do you say? That's an iconic position that reflects a whole bunch of people in our current society that believe in aliens or reptiles or any of these things. Sorry, not reptiles, reptilians.
Yeah, different things. Don't lump the lizards in with the lizard people.
I think you can believe in reptiles without believing in reptilians. Anyways, the point being is these people, are they crazy? But what if it turns out that they're right? Are they not crazy in the same way you're talking about prophets or all these people? And we can point at plenty of cults, the cult of the Twilight Sun,
Right.
or Jonestown, or any of these cults where you have this crazy person, so to speak, but all these people believe so.
Yeah. So when does a crazy person become a prophet? That's the question that pops into mind when I encountered this particular.
I guess when they have enough
story.
followers, right? It's the same thing with even taking it out of a religious context, political leadership, right? When does an extremist group or thought become more popular and rises to the top because of enough people believing in it? Whereas maybe 2 decades beforehand, you would say, no, anyone with those types of ideologies is a madman, and we would never have them in power.
Right. When are you founding a new country versus when are you just a upstart rebellion, as can be seen in American history? Any other thoughts here on Ohm freaking out about Brother transitioning to being a prophet? Maybe something about what Brother's thinking? I just enjoyed this part of it because it's a good intersection of the way that the Discworld is working, but also very much so how our own psychology works and how we work as groups versus individuals.
I don't know. I mean, Brother, in all honesty, Brother stops listening to Ohm, really.
That's true.
So
He kind of just stops listening. Like, all right, this is what I'm doing.
but he never stops believing in Ohm.
No, he does not. He does not stop believing in Ohm. It's almost like he forces Ohm to live up to what he believes his God should. It's a very interesting dynamic that takes place.
Do you have any other feelings on Brother, on Sanity, on his clash with Ohm as he's rising to prophethood?
I don't think so. I think that's a good ending point for that particular discussion.
Brother carries Vorbis out of the desert. He passes out. Vorbis wakes up before him, and he tells everyone that he saved Brother, and he's the next prophet, and he starts to become crowned as the new religious leader. So during that ceremony of Vorbis being crowned as the religious leader of Ohm, Brother, in his prophetic fever, walks up to Vorbis, raises his hand to strike him. Vorbis smiles and turns his cheek. But Brother stops and says, "No, I won't." And then we read, "Then, for the first and only time, he saw Vorbis really enraged."
It's a beautiful scene because Vorbis is constantly controlling his outward expression and appearance to other people, and he just completely loses his mask at this point because Brother is very rightfully so lifting his hand up to smack Vorbis, which would, in Vorbis's mind, solidify his legitimacy that he's stealing. And Brother just refuses to play that game.
Sometimes you win by not playing.
Yeah, a beautiful moment. I really like that moment that's built up to, and you see that all throughout Vorbis' character, constantly reinforced as in control, cold-blooded, cunning, presenting exactly how he wants to present.
And yet when he can't control the situation, he gets enraged. He becomes angry. It's the only time he loses his composure.
Right.
Because he doesn't control this.
And that's the moment, for me, that I see the power dynamic finally shift. Now it's Brother. For me, that's the moment Brother wins. Brother wins right there. There's a few more ups and downs in the story, but that's where it's now Brother is ascendant. Even though, again, it's an interesting inversion because Vorbis is on the verge of being crowned the Omnian version of the Pope.
I think it also shows just the strength of the character of Brother having that restraint.
Right. And the crazy thing is, Brother's not being calculating. He's just strongly flowing with what he feels is right moment to moment. He's not cunning. He doesn't have ulterior motives. It's the goodness in him that leads him to put his hand back down before hitting Vorbis.
Sure, almost a monk-like connection to him developing who he is and then just living moment to moment in that truth that he is.
It's a good way to put it.
Do you have any other feelings on this more or less climax of the book, of the protagonist defeating the antagonist?
Right. This is the moment where I think Vorbis is defeated, even though there's a few more beats and movements that happen after this. But he's defeated, and his ultimate, defeat and end is kind of a foregone conclusion at this point. We just get to see it play out. And I like the gentle, downhill to the ending of the novel here. This is the last high point, and it gently curves down and ties together.
Yeah, I mean, this is the climax for all intents and purposes.
Okay, let's talk about atheism a little. When Ohm is restored to full godhood, he is able to interact directly with those around him, regardless of their faith in him. In the face of the seemingly undeniable reality of God's interacting with the world, Sergeant Simony, who is an avowed anti-Ohmian and an atheist, doubles down openly on his atheism in front of Ohm. Ohm says, "And brave, too, to declare your atheism before your God." To which Simony replies, "This doesn't change anything, Don't think you can get round me by existing." End quote. This scene highlights a paradox. Intense atheism can resemble a religion in its dogmatism and fervor, mirroring the contradictions Simony criticizes in religious believers. Pratchett, to me, seems to be exploring whether rigid atheism is in its own way its own kind of faith or religion. What do you see here in this, particularly in this interaction with Simony and Ohm, but more general, the kind of back and forth between atheistic characters and believers?
I thought it was entertaining, especially Pratchett being a publicly atheistic person, and him kind of mocking atheism here in its own way by this atheistic character, seeing the God directly, and him being like, "Nope, you can't get around me by existing. I refuse to accept that."
So Pratchett was publicly atheist, and so this is almost him.
It seems almost tongue-in-cheek,
right?
In a fun inversion, almost in the way that we see Discworld is an inversion of the spherical real world that we live in. And in this inverted world, we have gods directly interacting with the world, displaying that gods are real, as opposed to potentially the inversion of gods not interacting with our world, and therefore religious people saying, "You can't get around me by not existing."
There's something about the great one-liners that get sprinkled throughout his book, and the way he seems to constantly have these inversions. I think it's part of the overall humor is that he does a great job of highlighting things that are paradoxical or contradictory and turning the volume up on those until they're hilarious. Is that, for someone who's read a lot more of his books, is that something you consistently see that his humor is based off of, is turning the volume up on paradoxical or contradictory situations?
I think part of the human there is the inversion or turning things up to a level of absurdism. I don't know that it says anything deeper or that there's a fervor and dogmatism to atheism. Maybe that's a comment that he is putting here.
I don't think he's saying that about atheism in general. To me, and this might be me reading a little too much into it, I see it as there's expressions and versions of atheism that are indistinguishable from religious belief, which is just interesting to note.
Yeah. Do those exist? Probably, yeah, for sure. Those exist. Is that what Pratchett is pointing out? It's possible. I think it's there. I also think Pratchett is not above making fun of anything to have a good laugh.
Everything's fair game.
Yeah, regardless of belief, regardless of how serious you take something.
Don't have any sacred cows, I've heard. Don't take yourself too seriously.
It's a good one. Yeah, I think we should all take ourselves less serious.
Hey, if someone wants to take themselves seriously, let them.
I mean, I'm not gonna fight them on that. Different ways of living.
Sometimes you have to live, one particular way before you can appreciate another way of living.
Yeah, and what a beautiful thing to do. Almost like chapters in a life, right? But no subheadings.
This also makes me think, Simony is displaying here our ability to cling towards seeing the world and ourselves through narrative in the face of facts and objective reality that we can just conveniently hop over. Here is someone, telling a God that don't think you can get away from me and my atheism by, trying to trick me by actually existing.
Yeah. Do you feel like that reflects people relying on stories or their own beliefs or narrations to view the world?
To me, it does. To me, it highlights how strongly the subjective, story-driven parts of our minds are. That's something I think about a lot, and that's just a great, poignant example of that. Is Simon is very human in that he is being contradictory in the face of this absurd reality, and he's making up his own story, and he's not going to let inconvenient truths get in the way of that.
Would you say similar to some religious people believing the earth is only 6,000 years old, despite the devil putting dinosaur bones in the ground just to trick us?
I think that's a fun narrative that someone needs that narrative to make sense of their world and their place in it. More importantly than the world, their place in it. How they see themselves playing out in a grand narrative. This goes all the way back to the first book we ever discussed on this podcast is Denial of Death and the hero myths that we need to give ourselves, the stories that we need to act out and live in. And that's a vital part of being human. And I think one of the main points Ernest Becker had in that book was that hero myths and stories are essential, but they need to not come at the expense of other people.
Do you feel like we have to live with stories? Do you think our lives would be better if we were able to live in a more factual-driven mindset?
I don't think it's possible for me. You tell me what you think, but I don't think it's possible for us to not see the world through narrative and story. We can be more aware of the fact that we do that. I just don't know that we can take ourselves out of the fishbowl we live in and look at it purely objectively. I think we're always going to be fish in water in a way because we only see things through story and narrative.
So we'll never get away from story and narrative?
I don't think so. What do you think?
I think we're more away from story and narrative now than we were 2,000 years ago.
I would completely disagree.
Well, that's great.
I would completely disagree because you can look at your own life or anyone right now and you could, this might be me overanalyzing or leaning too heavily into this interpretation, but you can see someone have the story of being objective. And I think that's kind of what Simone's doing here is he has the story that he's being, very objective and fact-based, and the inverted situation that can only be created in a fictitious novel like this is that an atheist is stamping his foot and swearing that God doesn't exist, that he is actually having a conversation with in person. And you see that in every situation. People right now, what we have now versus 2,000 years ago is people now have an additional story that they can adopt that's a more cunning game of believing in objective reality and leaning into materialism, but leaned in too hard in that direction is still belief in a narrative. You're still giving yourself a narrative. It's just a much more layered illusion, my opinion.
I mean, that's fine. But I think people are less susceptible to narrative fallacies than 2,000 years ago.
Why do you think that?
I think the access to information helps balance out local extremities that we would have 2,000 years ago, for better or for worse.
Access to more information helps us balance out just being influenced by what's immediately around us in a informational sense.
Mm-hmm.
Having access to more information, you don't think people are doing with more far-reaching sourced information the same thing that they've always done with their local information environment?
I think it helps balance it out further than the extremities that would exist without the continual flow of information that we have available. So if we
Say that part again?
It helps balance out the extremities we would have in only locally sourced information. So if we take isolated cultures and we look at them now, they've all balanced closer towards the median. They've had a regression towards the mean.
You're saying disparate cultures and people and communities through globalization and access to different people and thoughts around the world is causing people to behave more objectively or interact with the world more objectively?
Less so than the previous localization of storytelling. We still have stories and there's narration. I just imagine that it's less prominent in skewed manners now than it was 2,000 years ago.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I don't see that. That's interesting, though.
That's fine.
This would be a great spot for us to hear from listeners. I would love for listeners to chime in and give us their thoughts, because this is the great part about discussing books, is because we get to see fun disagreements and have good. This is where the best conversations come from, is when there's a disagreement. We can look at the same topic from multiple angles.
What's the fun of agreeing all the time?
I'm telling you, the listeners are here to hear us fight.
Okay, so we have all that. Anything else you want to disagree on there?
Nope. Let's find other things to disagree about. I think there's one more topic from the book that we can talk about, and I think you want to get into some reviews and other thoughts.
Yeah, but first we have kind of the ending of the book where the two armies are about to meet, they're going to fight, and we have Brother kind of stepping in and saying that they shouldn't fight. So as he does that, he says, quote, "Look, listen, we died for lives. For centuries we died for lives." He waved a hand towards the god, meaning Om. "Now we've a truth to die for. No, men should not die for lies, but the truth... No, men should die for lies, but the truth is too precious to die for." What do you think that means?
Men should die for lies, but the truth is too precious to die for. Yeah, I put this in here because I'm not quite sure what that means. Men should die for lies, but the truth is too precious to die for. In the context here, he is trying to get two opposing forces to not go to battle with each other.
To me, I read it as if you are understanding the actual truth, then you don't want to die for that. If we do have the truth, maybe that in itself is enough to not die. People die for lies rather than die for truths. And maybe we can look at, say, the Crusades or jihads, where people die for what Pratchett would argue as an atheist is for lies, right? Religious fervor, rather than truth, which is we're all humans and we should be supporting each other.
Very interesting. Very interesting in that context.
Or maybe not. What do you think?
I don't know. I haven't made sense of this yet. That's I like that interpretation, though, that in the context of going to battle or going on a crusade, that's a form of people dying for lies. Within the context of a crusader, it's contradictory for a religion that's supposed to be about love and peace to go kill non-believers. That seems contradictory, and that's a lie based off of that religion. But the truth is too precious to die for. Based off of the interpretation you're giving, the truth being too precious to die for, there is, like what you just said, is that, hey, we're humans and we have that as common ground, and that should be enough to prevent us from going to war.
Yeah, why did America go to Vietnam? Just all propagandist lies.
Yeah.
What did those young men die for?
Yeah.
It wasn't for the
truth.
The
wording here is just what trips me up, but the way you're interpreting it, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
And that's one of the last beautiful lines on the book.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to add to what we had here?
No, I think that's a good way of looking at it. You want to take us through reviews? I think you've done a good job of collecting some reviews and criticisms.
I think it's fun to read the bad reviews, as in the reviews that look poorly on the book. We did that for Outlived, the most recent book that we reviewed, and
you want me to read these to
you?
So
no.
I rail against them a little bit. I'll read them off to you because I want to hear you defend this book.
There's nothing to defend. It's just a great book.
It stands on its own merits. So it looks like here one of the common criticisms that gets put up both about this book and Pratchett's work in general is that it's too satirical or too ridiculous. Quote, Small Gods provides an interesting premise and question to be explored, yet Pratchett chooses to explore it in a meandering, overcrowded way. Pratchett's novel is weakened by its setting, as through the absurdity of Discworld, the overall message of his piece is diminished. It makes approaching this issue, and indeed reading it, feel convoluted and often lost, as several key thematic assertions are clouded over by needless detail of the world or simple anomalies not relatable at all to human life. Your reaction, Joel?
What a fun way to look at this, because Pratchett, I think, is masterful at taking big concepts and boiling them down, and sometimes boiling them down so far that they're a single line that you can walk away with, and that's pretty fun.
Did you get this from Goodreads? Is this another Goodreads review?
They're all Goodreads.
Oh,
Goodreads. That's where you get the best, worst reviews. The best, worst, bad reviews. They're so fun. Listen, if there was a good, bad review, both for Outlived and for this book and any other book that we do, I'll add those good critiques here because I love a good critique. And I pulled one of the most articulate ones here, which is what you just quoted.
Well, I was reading it, I fixed some poor writing.
This is one of the best articulate ones. You don't even want me to copy over the terribly written ones. So I think in this way, the person overlooks Pratchett's whole thematic point, which is to be so ridiculous, to be so humorous, that it's easy to digest these topics. And there's other fun, scholastic, academic ways to look at big topics, but they're so dull and dry. You're not going to go read a professor's dissertation on religious ideology. I mean, maybe you would, but you would probably be a scholar in that field. Instead, in order to make something digestible, you coat it with humor and you allow it to be a narration and a story. Way better. So they just don't even understand the value of absurdism.
You mean absurdity. Absurdism, that's Camus' thing. They don't understand the value of absurdity. And you're saying the value of absurdity here is that it entertains you and is a great vehicle for discussing and thinking about heavier topics.
Yeah, and I think, I can't remember the quote, so I can't quote it directly, but something about humor can oftentimes open doors while truth is still banging to be let in.
Interesting. So I guess this leads to, I have two questions based off of that. What do you think, why do you think Pratchett wrote this book? You've read his stuff. You're a lot more familiar with him. You've, in a way, like toured his thinking a little bit more. Why do you think he wrote this book?
I think he was further developing Discworld as a universe, but also sharing his thoughts and opinions in a fun way. And some of his other books are almost purely entertainment, but they pull up lively themes for you to look at, or look at characters develop in certain ways. And for me, although there is that huge entertainment value, I mean, you could see even in this book here, there were so many real life themes that you could talk about inside of it that he brings forth and gives you an insight into what he thinks.
Yeah. I guess there's not a way for us to know. It's an interesting combination of a fantasy story, a platform for funny one-liners, a platform for funny situations. It's also, like you were saying, a further development of the universe he's been creating and writing in. And it's also a platform for real human psychological heavy topics and philosophical topics. And I think the combination there, if I were to try to create an Iron Man version of what is one of the points being argued here, is that that's too much in one setting, and it needlessly takes away from the ability to accurately talk about any one of those one things. I don't agree with that, but is that what you would see maybe as the strongest version of one of the points that are being made here?
I think so. In several of the reviews I read, it's that the novel is too absurd or too humorous, sometimes poking fun at religious institutions. Therefore, it's hard for them to engage with Pratchett's message because it's quote unquote diminished. Which in that regard, I think you're just overlooking. You got something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you. It's just weird to be offended by the way an author writes a book just because it doesn't match up with how you want to read about the topic.
Right.
It's just interesting. We saw that again with Outlive. And so it's not for everybody. It's not. It took me a little getting used to. I don't like the Monty Python ridiculous level of some books and presentations, and this is an example of it. But I can appreciate it for what it is. Like, if I go into this book and get mad because it's not like other fiction or fantasy books I've read, what's the point of that? I just go read a different book.
Serious enough.
I do really like some serious, heavy fantasy, but that's not what this is. And there's no point in me being mad about that not being it. And to say it's too ridiculous, it's just as ridiculous as Pratchett wanted it to be. That's part of the point, in my opinion. Point. And once I got over that, I was able to really appreciate and enjoy the humor.
I don't know anyone that's going to make it to the episode 2 at the end of the episode and have either not read the book or have not had an interest in the book. But I would say if you're not interested in absurd humor, then you shouldn't read the book because it's not for you.
Right, it's not for you.
Yeah, and that's okay.
So another common theme of the negative reviews you found, or people that rated it poorly, was that it was tedious and boring. They didn't get it. The humor is biting, often sarcastic, surprising, and sometimes dark. Is that just a description or a critique there?
I mean, I of course only pulled all this stuff from 1-star reviews. That's
not even a good 1-star review to someone say, oh, the humor was surprising. So they were complaining about the darkness of the humor, or
I think so. And in one of the
dryness of the humor.
Yeah, in one of the regards, I will say Terry Pratchett is British. You can't get past the fact that he is British. His humor
kind of scream off the page.
Is seeped in a soup of British.
Yeah.
So
you're just going to have to accept he's British.
I think it's similar to the first camp of critiques that I talked about, which is if you don't like that type of humor, then you're not going to enjoy the book because it is constant humor to humor to humor. And there are dark, torturous themes. And that's another thing inside of this camp of bad reviews I've read is they were like, I don't understand how you could make a torture scene comical.
You can. He did it.
And the way that Monty Python has the Spanish Inquisition, right, in the Holy Grail, where they are actively, in a very humorous way, torturing people or talking about death.
I can understand that sentiment of, hey, there's some things we shouldn't make fun of. But if you have that feeling, I think it's something that needs to be explored because, I don't know, you got to be careful about thinking some things are off limit for humor. So yes. I think some stuff can be in very poor taste. I didn't get that feeling from a torture scene being made humorous.
I mean, Terry Pratchett didn't say any like bombastic things that had a political connection in the same way like, oh, if you made a 9/11 joke in December of 2001,
it's not going to go over well.
People would probably be pretty disparaging of that because of the proximity to tragedy. But Pratchett didn't do that in here.
Right. Part of processing the dark parts of our human nature and dark parts of our history is getting to the point where we can look at it and joke about it. Yeah. There's a time and place, and I don't think he stepped over any particular lines with that.
He had no real-world connection things, so I can't see it being too humorous for too dark of an event. And there were plenty of times where people wrote, I didn't get it. And I could understand that, especially if you are neither American nor British and English is your second or third language. I completely understand you not getting this book.
That's a good point. Yeah. If you're coming to this not as a native speaker, this is very much something that'd be difficult
Yeah.
to
Or
translate.
Australian. An Australian reader would also understand this because they have
Yeah.
a similar connection to American and British culture.
Right. That is a good point.
So I could get it if they didn't get it.
Okay,
In that
one of the
context.
last themes of the negative reviews that seems to have emerged is that people felt they could not connect with the characters.
And to that response, I already wrote this because when I was reading through multiple sets of this review, I just felt sad for these readers. Do you need to connect to a character for a book to be good? Are you so lonely that you can't accept that you don't need to see yourself in every character and situation? Why are you shaking your head?
Yeah, you got a point.
So that's one of the things that I love, not only of Pratchett's book. I don't mean to keep defending his books, but there's plenty of movies or books where I'm like, I'm nothing like that character, but I love seeing this entity. I love seeing like this quote unquote thought experiment. And the easiest one that I thought of is another British example of Sherlock Holmes, right? Sherlock Holmes is not meant to be a relatable character. He's a savant where he has a drug addiction, but he's super good at seeing nuanced details that no one else sees. You're not supposed to connect to him and be like, oh, I'm just like Sherlock Holmes. I'm not like Brother, nor am I like Vorbis, nor am I like Ohm. But they're fun thought experiments as characters and people.
Why would I read a book about me?
Because you're lonely and sad and need a reflection of yourself.
I do remember having that thought. Like, I have a really hard time relating to any of these characters, but I never remember being bored or bothered by that. It was enjoyable. They are through and through truly characters, and that's fine with me. I'm fine with that. I can be entertained. Some people can't be entertained.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
There
Well,
you go.
I think this is definitely a segment of the podcast we will be doing from now on because this is fun. We need to look at more negative reviews.
It is fun.
So to wrap up here, again, one of the great things about this book that I think we could both agree on is there's some great one-liners. We've gone through a few of these. You want to list off, some of your one-liners or quotes here that
Sure. I
you
won't
enjoyed?
reread the ones that we already said earlier in the episode, but let's read through a few of these quotes. Quote, "May your genitals fall off, sprout wings, and fly away. Guilt was the grease in which the wheels of authority turned."
Especially in the Omnian religion. One of the ones that I really liked was gravity is a habit that is hard to shake off. That was an instance of like a character falling or something painful or fatal happening to a character. And then words are the litmus paper of the mind.
What a fun one-liner that is also true.
Yeah. You can't inspire people with facts. They need a cause. They need a symbol. He's right.
Yeah.
He's right. That one's not really humorous, but he does sum things up.
Just
Some
another
people would
quote.
say he sums things up a little too well. Or maybe they don't even recognize that he's summing stuff up so
Right.
well. Like you were saying, humor gets past the defenses while logic's still banging on the door.
Yeah.
And it's not worth doing something unless someone somewhere would much rather you weren't doing it. That's a good point.
Yeah. What a fun quote.
But all in all, a good, fun fiction diversion from our last fictional or our last nonfiction book we went into. Next episode, we will be jumping into some nonfiction again. I think it's going to involve some samurai logic, and look forward to talking about that.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. That could go as deep or as shallow as we want.
We'll see.
Okay.
Any last thoughts you got, Joel?
No. I don't have any more thoughts. Do you have any more thoughts?
I am thought out.
Okay.
So with that, thank you for listening to us and joining us. This has been the Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Remember, you can reach us at deepdivebookclub@gmail.com.
Or on Instagram at Deep Dive Book Club. Please send us your thoughts and opinions, your feelings, your ideas, your comments, your discrepancies, your arguments, whatever you want.
Disputations, rants.
That'll
Let's
be great.
hear 'em.
That'll be great. And with that, we'll be back next week.
Bye, guys.